Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris, where we attempt to make the world a safer place, one podcast at a time. Today, I'm going to share with you a recording of a Safety Roundtable discussion that we had recently, and it's all about the 3 keys to defending more insurance claims. Now, clearly, if you work in the world of safety, and this was shown in the State of Safety report results that we shared recently on the podcast as well, we want to prevent people from getting hurt in the first place, and we clearly want to prevent any serious or significant incidents. However, sometimes things do go wrong and accidents do happen, and that's when a personal injury claim can land on your plate. And as we talk about not wanting to spoil the content too much, there's a significant volume, hundreds of thousands of people a year make personal injury claims. So what can we do to be in the best possible position to defend more of those claims? That's the topic of discussion today. I set out 3 principles that you should bear in mind. I share a bit of a ninja tip as well to make the process speed up and improve incrementally over time. And then, as always, on the Safety Roundtable, we open it up to a discussion with some of the panelists and get some great feedback, great examples, some fantastic insights from the panelists as well. As always, hope you enjoy this episode and get some value from it. Do give us a review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting platform you use. But more importantly, I'd love for you to do a post on social media, tag me in, tag the podcast in, and give us some feedback, give us some thoughts, because we love hearing what you think about it. Let's join this Safety Roundtable session then on the 3 keys to defending more insurance claims. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
So it's great to see you here, and here's the agenda for the meeting. So let's get started. Firstly, a quick intro to me for anybody that doesn't know who I am, and therefore will be thinking, what's this guy doing talking about this topic, perhaps? So I, every week, do a few bits of content around the topics of safety and risk. So I do this roundtable every Wednesday. I've got a podcast just coming up to the 100th episode of the podcast, actually, which will be very soon. And I do a newsletter on LinkedIn as well. My day job is in the field of slips and falls, and if you happen to have read the State of Safety report that we released recently, that shows that this is the biggest area of risk exposure, of incidents and costs, and of priority for safety and risk professionals. In that field, I've worked on some high-profile cases, such as this one, which was a death in a co-op store in Truro in 2015. The business has won some awards. The business is called Slip Safety Services. We've won some awards. We've got some great partnerships with the likes of AXA and some lovely clients like Network Rail and CPRE. And I do a fair bit of stuff with the likes of IOSH in terms of content. We've helped over 5,000 client sites. And at last count, we reckoned we're helping our clients to prevent about £10 million of claims a year. So that's very relevant data in the context of this discussion today. So when it comes to the volume of personal injury claims, it's pretty significant. So we're right in the middle of Wimbledon as we record this, or we're sort of 75% of the way through Wimbledon, shall we say. So anybody that's had their TV on recently would have seen Centre Court jam-packed full of people. It's nice to see it full again, obviously, after the last few years. So let's think about Centre Court of Wimbledon, and how many centre courts are there worth of UK personal injury claims every year? I'd love to see some guesses in the chat. So head on to the chat. I'm going to open my phone and see what people are guessing on LinkedIn as well, because I can't have it open on my computer, obviously, because it seems to create background noise. But yeah, how many centre courts worth of personal injury claims are there per year? So in other words, there's X people in centre court, and there are Y multiples of that that make a personal injury claim every year. Let's have a look at some of these guesses. 1,000 times 500, 500, 200, 150. Okay, there's some high guesses here. I like it. If we're thinking this is a big problem. 600. Good stuff. Okay, thank you guys. I'll give you the answer. So, it is big. Is it one centre court? I think that's a bit too low. Perhaps it's 5, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. The actual answer is 55.4 centre courts worth of personal injury claims in the UK each year. 830,000 in 2019/20. There's a typo on the slides here, but it's 2019/20. I use that number because obviously COVID, was a strange year. Centre court is what is it? It's about 19,000 or something like that. The capacity. There was a fall of volume of claims due to COVID. If you think about it, it makes sense because fewer people were going out and about and doing things. The motors claims market fell significantly during COVID as well. So that does all make logical sense. But that's a lot of people making claims, obviously. And if you do the maths, that works out at 95 personal injury claims per hour, per day, 24/7 throughout the year. So there are a lot of these claims happening. In terms of some of the trends and the drivers, though, there are ups and downs in this. So overall, the volume has been declining slowly and steadily over the years. And there have been attempts made successfully by government to streamline the claims process, for example, cap on solicitors' fees. And that's been successful in making claims kind of quicker and reducing some of the legal fees, and that is driving down some of the volumes as well. Conversely, though, we are seeing costs in terms of awards rising. Question mark here because this is a discussion point. I'd be interested to get your feedback later on this when we open it up. Is there a claims culture, and to what extent is that driving the market? And then something that we've talked about a fair bit, and again, I'm interested to hear your feedback on this and any experiences so far. There was certainly a big fear when COVID hit that there would be a tsunami of claims. And I think that from what I'm hearing, the direct COVID claims haven't been that significant. In other words, Mr. Employer, I caught COVID at work and it's your fault and I'm putting a claim in against you. But the indirect claims have been significant, and there's a huge potential for things like musculoskeletal claims because more people are working from home. Have we done rigorous and adequate workplace assessments for people working from home, for example? So there's a lot of potential there to drive the market up again. So let's think about that then in the context of that volume of claims. What can we do to try and defend more claims in our businesses? And I'm a fan of principles, as you'll have noticed if you've taken in any of my content before, trying to boil things down to memorable phrases or key points. And so these are the 3 keys that I've seen to work at increasing the ability to defend claims over my years working in this field. So the first one is mindset, the second one is actions, and the third one is evidence. So these are the three things we need to bear in mind. Mindset then, let's start with that. So to me, we should be focusing on prevention and not on claims defensibility. I'll give you an analogy. So I obviously spend my life trying to promote the benefits of a proactive approach towards slip and fall risk management. But if I went out there every day on LinkedIn or on the Safety Roundtable or on my podcast, or if I did a webinar for IOSH or whoever it might be, and I just started saying, buy a slip test, buy an anti-slip treatment, buy some safety footwear, hammering home kind of these salesy messages, that just simply would not work. If you want to grow sales in your business, my tip is to stop asking for sales and start instead looking for signals of interest. And I think that's analogous to this. Let's not focus on the claims defensibility side. Let's focus upstream on what's going to happen before that, because to get a sale, you've got to have a signal of interest. To get a claim, you've got to have something bad happen. So if we can focus on prevention, I think moving our emphasis upstream is certainly what I would recommend. There's a few reasons for that, because firstly, you can control the inputs but not the outputs. So you can control the risk, but you can't control if somebody's going to make a claim or not. You can put in place safety footwear, for example. You can put in place cameras to detect forklift truck movements. You can do all sorts of things that are within your control, but the further downstream we get, the less control you have. Clearly, it's better if we don't have an incident in the first place, because if there's no accident, there's no incident, then it's impossible for there to be a legitimate claim. So, if we can turn off that river, we can dam up that river of claims, then that will have a positive effect because it'll enable us to have more time on working on the claims that do come through. And I think by focusing on the upstream prevention, you actually get to understand the issues much more deeply, and you kind of avoid this superficiality of approach, which I see far too often, certainly in my world. I think it's really important to understand, what are the real root causes, what are the real drivers of incidents happening, and that is going to enable you to put in place policies, systems, claims defensibility, tactics and strategies based on deep knowledge rather than kind of best guesses, because I think where people fall down a lot of the time is that they don't necessarily go deep enough into these subjects. And then the last thing I would say around prevention is, if you can prove that you're doing good stuff around prevention, then you're absolutely on a very, very strong footing when it comes to the test of reasonable practicality. So, was that reasonable or was that practicable? If you're focusing on prevention and you can actually track and evidence what you've been doing in this area and actually the results of it, it's very hard for somebody to argue that you're not taking reasonable and practicable steps because you are focusing on the right side of the coin, as it were. So focus on prevention, not claims defensibility. Get the mindset of this question right. Second point, second key is actions. And the maxim I've used here is under-promise and over-deliver. I mentioned the State of Safety report. In that report, 2/3 of respondents cited safety culture as a challenge to, or a blocker to getting their safety outcomes achieved. In other words, an example, yesterday I had a phone call with somebody who's quite senior in a pretty big business, and we were talking about their claims history and how things have been improving over time. But he said to me, we're always going to have issues, and where we do have issues, it's because typically our team haven't done what they should have done, and so our challenge is how can we coach them, encourage them, cajole them to do more of what they should be doing. So getting people to do stuff is going to be difficult. Driving that at the moment is this whole kind of COVID, post-COVID challenge, because we've overloaded people. People are doing more with less. Obviously, we've also got the cost of living crisis, the Brexit, Labour shifts, and various other macro drivers at the moment as well, which are all putting a lot of pressure on people doing their day jobs. And obviously, human nature is such that we are fallible. We do make mistakes. I make mistakes every day, but yet we can't get everything done by a machine. So we do have to have some human element of what we're doing in many businesses. So how do we deal with that? I interviewed on my podcast a while back a guy called Matthew Snar, who is a barrister, and I was chatting to him about, he works in catastrophic personal injury cases, typically, both for claimants and defendants. So he sees both sides. And I asked him the question, when it comes to a health and safety policy, excuse me, is it better to have the Rolls-Royce, the Harrods, the all singing, all dancing, best health and safety policy in the world, thinking of every single angle down to the most minute detail, but that policy is hard to actually implement? Or is it better to have something which is good but is done? And he said, absolutely, good and done is better than great but not done. Because in the event of a claim, as I'm sure you will all know, one of the big things that you're going to have to do is to produce proof and evidence of what you've actually done. And so if you've got it's all well and good having a policy, you can have the best policy in the world, but if you can't actually deliver on that policy, then it's not going to help you, it's going to hinder you. So I think it's better, within reason, to think about what you can do that meets the test of reasonable and practicable. And that's where I think focusing on the preventative side of things, it ties in nicely with this, but not overburdening your team to actually deliver on what you've said. So it's better to under-promise and over-deliver. And to me, implementation is everything. So I spend Wednesday mornings giving ideas to you guys and learning what you're doing as well. But actually, watching this or listening to this on the podcast is great, and you could learn something. But the value of all of these ideas and the value of these discussions is actually in the implementation of delivering them. Because think of it like this: how many people say they want to write a book? I think it's something like 10 or 15% of people say they're going to write a book or would like to write a book. How many people actually write a book? Probably 0.0 something percent of people. And so having the idea is great, but actually it's about the delivery, the implementation. And, using that book analogy, taking it a step further, a book that's 95% finished, sitting on your hard drive and you're tinkering with, is not a book. It's only a book when it's out there in the marketplace. So actions, under promise, over deliver. And the third point is, the third key is evidence. So this really is critical, because standing up in court and saying, I thought this, I thought that, is not very useful. I did this, here's the proof. We did that, here's the proof, is where you want to be. So there are 4 types of proof that I think that we need. But before we delve into those, here's something that I've often thought, and I don't know if this is a direct quote, but it's certainly an idea and a concept that I've heard and had explained to me before, which is that we judge everyone else on what they do, but we judge ourselves on what we intend to do, or what we plan to do, or what we want to do. And I can certainly relate to this in my personal life. Domestic bliss. I was just about to put the laundry on, darling, or I was just about to do the washing up. whereas my wife is judging me based on have you actually done it or not. So I think we have good intentions. If you're consuming this roundtable, you're doing it because you've got a good intention of keeping people safe and reducing costs and all that great stuff. But actually, it's about what have we done? What have we actually delivered? What can we prove we've done as well, rather than what we intend to do? So I would say that we need to have 4 types of proof. So I think we need to have proof around that mindset piece and focusing on prevention. We need to clearly have proof around actions. So have we done what we said we were going to do? And we need to have timely proof. So we need to have proof of what we've done before any incident. We need to have contemporaneous proof, so witness statements and photographs and all that other stuff. And it's really important to capture that kind of thing to help to prove that you've done what you said you were doing. And then after the event as well, in terms of investigations and how we look into these incidents, it's really important to gather the right kinds of evidence. And what I would also say is that scientific and third-party proof, in my experience, is much more powerful than your own proof, as it were. In other words, think of this scenario. You're standing in court explaining some risk management approaches that you've taken and the efficacy of those and whether or not they were reasonable and practicable. Would it be more powerful? Would you feel more confident of winning that argument if you were basing that all on your view and your hunch and work that you've done internally, or B, basing that on the help of an advice of a credible third party, which could be your lawyer, it could be your insurer, it could be a broker, it could be a specialist provider like my business does in the field of slips and falls, and your approach has been validated, advised by that third party, and you've also got some kind of scientific measurement or quantification of the approach you've taken and the efficacy of it. Which of those scenarios are you going to feel more comfortable with? I suspect scenario B. So I think having that third party proof, particularly if you can do something scientific in terms of quantifiable evidence, is much, much more powerful. And here's a ninja tip for you. Perhaps it could have been the 4th key, but it's a ninja tip. So once you've got all of those 3 keys working well, then I would move on to this 4th point, which is to kind of create this flywheel of continuous improvement. And this needs to include engagement with some stakeholders. So your insurer, when it comes to claims, there's obviously a commerciality to this question. It's not simply a case of, are we bang to rights here, or should we fight this claim? Because there could well be a case where, you feel very strongly you should fight it, but perhaps the cost of fighting it versus the cost of settling it may be imbalanced, and therefore getting your insurer involved in your approach and your philosophy and the delivery of all of this stuff is really important, because if you can get them on board, they can sit behind you strongly and support you in the approach you want to take. Your broker is another important partner to get involved, stakeholder. Your lawyer or your claims handler, suppliers, your team. We need to get all of these people involved and try to weave together all of those 3 keys, but in a continuous improvement cycle, because we should be able to keep on making small incremental improvements, and the outcome of that is going to be fewer incidents because we're focusing on prevention. It's going to be a higher performing team because we're focusing on action. It's going to be better repudiation rates because we're focusing on collecting all the evidence of the things we're doing, and that is going to drive positive business outcomes in terms of engagement, productivity, and of course profit. Bringing this together then into an example, David Scott is a lawyer who works for Keogh's, and he looks after hospitality and leisure clients. And I was chatting to him on the podcast about swimming pool slip claims, and he said, people might slip over on a swimming pool when the floor is wet and feel as if they're entitled to make a claim. No, was what he said. Because if you've got compliant slip test data, you should expect to defend that claim. What does he mean by that? Well, remember, our obligation under the law is not to prevent every accident, it's to take reasonable and practicable steps to reduce the risk. And so if you think about a swimming pool, and I'm using this example because obviously this is my world, and this is the world that I know best. The floor is always going to get wet, so therefore thinking about we're trying to keep the floor dry, and lots of other risk management initiatives around slips is just not realistic. The floor is always going to get wet, but the floor can be safe when it's wet. How do you prove that? Through the slip test. So if you've got that third-party scientific evidence, you're proving that you're focusing on prevention. In other words, you've got the right mindset. You've got the data to back up that your actions are doing what you need, and that's producing evidence. You're ticking all of these boxes. And David's view, and I've seen this many times as well, is that grab all of those things together, and you're able to defend claims which previously you wouldn't have been able to, because you just simply weren't able to tick all of those boxes. And bringing that all together, focusing on that kind of approach with a slant towards outcomes of claims. We worked with a leisure operator with over 100 sites, and we managed to, by turning these keys, doing lots of other stuff as well, but focusing on this point because this to them was the key driver, we managed to reduce their volume of claims significantly. So they were getting, in terms of slip claims, they were getting about one a week, and that reduced to about one a month. And then we were also able to help them to repudiate 20% more claims as well. So overall, that was a significant saving if you think about reducing the volume and improving the success rate. If that resonates with you in any way, and you'd like to chat a bit about what you can do turning these keys around the topic of slips and falls, feel free to head over to christianharris.online and book in a chat with me for, I think it's about 45 minutes, so we can do a deep dive and I can understand a bit more about your business. I can explain a little bit more about what we do and see if there's any overlap between them. Next week on the roundtable, which is 13th of July, we're going to be talking about a topic close to my heart. Here's why safety should be overseen by your sales director. Controversial, perhaps. This is going to be 10:30 next week due to a personal event, my son's school, that I've got to be at 9. We're going to do it at 10:30. And actually, something I've been thinking about is changing the time anyway, but we'll pick that up another day. But yeah, next week, 10:30. Here's why safety should be overseen by a sales director. So that's it from me today. We will open up to some discussion. So go to reactions, raise your hand. I can see there's been some stuff in the chat, but I haven't actually been reading it. But feel free to go to reactions, raise your hand. I'll call you up and unmute yourself. What did you think? What did you think of the 3 keys? Did you learn anything? Can you share any successes you've had in terms of defending more claims? Or conversely, have you got anything you could share, lessons learned where you've tried and perhaps not achieved what you wanted to? And which of the 3 keys do you think in your business you need to be putting most emphasis on? So I will stop sharing. And Nikki, you've got your hand up. You're keen and able. So why don't you unmute yourself and say hello? Oh no, I can't hear you. You're not muted, but I can't hear you. Oh dear. Does anybody else want to step up to the breach, and whilst Nikki sees if she can unmute herself? Let's see a few comments in the chat here. Yeah, so issues can be known about by doing a great risk assessment. Yes, absolutely, that's a key part. However, a risk assessment will only pick up significant change rather than daily risk. Yeah, small changes that can really affect risk. Behaviours need to be considered. Absolutely, that comes within actions, I would say. It's telling you that the host is preventing unmuting. That's a bit weird. Let me see if I can do something about that. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Yes. Okay. Do you want to try now, Nikki? No, I still can't hear you. Oh dear. Does anybody else? Who shall I pick on? Dave. Oh, somebody made a noise there. David Wilson, unmute yourself and just say hello, just to check that you can talk.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So maybe there's a problem with Nikki's microphone. Okay. How are you, David?
I'm okay. How are you, Christian? You okay?
Yeah, I'm well actually. I'm very, very busy at the moment, and yeah, coming up to school holidays, which is going to be fun on the one hand and stressful on the other hand. So can't complain too much. Andy Powell, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself?
I've done that. How's that? You hear me okay?
Yeah. How are you doing, Andy?
Yeah, fine. I'm good, Christian. Are you? Apologies, traffic. The traffic was awful getting into work this morning, so I've only caught the end of it really. But for me, it's all around making sure that we've got all the proactive stuff in place, ensuring, like you say, that with auditing, we're doing risk assessments and making sure people are trained, etc. The equipment's in a fit state to operate. And then if we do have an accident, unfortunately, it's making sure that when we have the investigation, that it's a full and thorough investigation carried out, because and include as much detail as we can and have that evidence to back it us up. Yeah, but for me, it's all around. Obviously, the reactive stuff will look after itself, but we just need to make sure that the inputs that we put in are proactive.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I think it's people, rightly focus on getting that reactive stuff right because it's important. But actually, as I said, I think if you think of claims like a river, the River Thames flowing, or the Amazon or something, or the Mississippi flowing through claim after claim after claim, as we saw, 95 800,000 personal injury claims a year. What can we do to sort of stop that river a little bit, abate the flow of the river, and put some kind of dam up through some good risk management? And I think that's where we can have a big impact.
Yeah, and I've worked with a couple of industries which have had really, really big claim cultures. And again, it's around development of our people as well, and especially our leadership. So I class anyone from like a line leader up as a leader, and it's developing those people as well to support that process. Yeah.
There's a good comment here from Darren, which is that we've found our biggest improvement to claim defensibility has been to get our insurers and paralegals into our business, so they fully understand what our policies and procedures actually are, rather than what their interpretation is, having read our documentation. And I think that's a great idea, and that's kind of that ninja tip that I sort of suggested, which is you need to think about this not in isolation, but as a sort of living, breathing, sinuous thing, and just try to get as many people involved as you can. I mean, in my world, lots of the time, someone slips and the immediate reaction from the building manager is to blame the cleaning contractor or the cleaners, and that isn't always necessarily the case. But you can sometimes end up in this kind of conflict because he said, she said, etc. actually, if you think about things a bit more strategically and a bit more proactively and with a partnership mindset, you can do stuff up front proactively to better understand the risk. For example, if you're a cleaning contractor and you take over a shopping centre, would it not make sense to work with that shopping centre owner to do some slip testing, to measure the depth of the matting, to look at the slopes and gradients of the surfaces, to check what cleaning regime is recommended on day one, and then you understand where the risks are, and then you can do something to be preventative and proactive rather than waiting for a bad thing to happen. Tim, you've got your hand up. How are you doing?
Morning. Two things in my head, really. Firstly, great shares from yourself, Christian. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
One of the actions or one of the keys that I always try and talk about is what, as a manager or a director, people need to look at. We've mentioned risk assessments. One of the things for me is, do you look at those controls at face value?
Yeah.
Actually show me. I use one analogy. I spent a lot of time in retail, and I'll never forget going onto a delicatessen and talking to a colleague who I asked, how do you temperature check this department? And she said, oh, front, middle and back, here and here. Oh, that's great. Can I see your temperature logbooks? Shows me the temperature logbooks. Wonderful. Can I see your probe? Get it out the cupboard, show me how you assemble it. Right, can you turn it on? There was no battery in it. Actually, if I'd stopped at the control of those temperature records, I'd be selling unsafe food. Yeah. So do I take documentation at face value, or do I say, show me, and go a little bit deeper into how I'm managing people? And then the other thing that's going around in my head, I spent a lot of time in an outdoor adventure theme park where accidents did happen. Mm-hmm. And we accept that the inevitable, someone will have an accident of some description. For me, is how we react to that. We can prevent a claim by actually having superb first aiders on site.
Yeah.
Having how we react to that incident, having the right person turning up with the right skill set. Mm. And if they are a people person, and if they make that person their total world for that 10-15 minutes of sorting them out, actually they get home and they go, well, you should sue them. Oh no, he was lovely, he did everything for me. And you've lost that claim there and then.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I've seen some fantastic success by, this has typically been driven by insurers, interestingly, rather than companies, although I'm sure companies are doing it as well. But supporting people through the recovery and rehabilitation process as well, which kind of helps to, as you say, to sort of put your arms around them and make them feel as if you care, because everybody understands that accidents can happen, right? Nobody, I think, would ever claim that an accident can never happen. So, but it's how you react to it and how you deal with it, isn't it, is really, really important. So yeah, that's a great tip there. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to contribute today?
Can you hear me yet, Christian?
Yes, I can hear you now, Nikki.
I don't know.
But sorry, we're out of time now. So no, I'm just joking.
Yeah, funny. Great topic, by the way. Some really great points by everybody, which is really good. I suppose seems quite simplistic, but having previous businesses that I've worked for, again, similar to other people, definitely had claims cultures in them. I think that it's something we should definitely be aware of going into the climate that we're going into. I think there's a temptation there, where especially if somebody is quite vocal about a successful claim, it can soon flip on their 10p, on a coin as to what that culture looks like. In larger businesses, working with criminal lawyers, we brought in really to do presentations with our safety team and SLT, and one of their simplistic and simple messages was about culpability. So it's really the language and how your pack is put together. So it's really a lot of the language that can be used early on in an investigation is around, there was a slip because the floor was wet, those types of languages. Whereas actually what you should be doing is looking to say, it's proving that you've got the process in place, that you have all of the controls, and actually this was a one specific event whereby something happened. So on this particular day, although we've got all of these controls in place, this one particular person still slipped. Or rather than saying, there was no training in place, it's trying to demonstrate, yes, we've got a full training program, but on this one particular occasion, this one person didn't receive that training. So that's, it's a lot of it is around the language, and it can trip you up, unfortunately. So we had almost like it's having a sign-off with a claims team, an intercompany claims team. So it's great that you have the investigation done, but you really need to, before you submit that package, review that language and maybe sort of tailor how that is put across in order to make sure that you're not, admitting the culpability. And the other thing that's going around in my head is around previous businesses. I've always had a challenge, and I wondered anybody else on here I'd be interested around post actions. So obviously preventative is brilliant, but when we have done the investigation, post actions, doing corrective actions, does that, I've had a lot of senior team feel that makes us more guilty, that you're admitting accountability by changing things, and that you could be putting yourself in a worse position. Just interested to know what people think there.
Thank you, Nikki. Let's let anybody else jump in. Feel free just to unmute. But that third point on, we've had an issue, we've done something to remedy it, to stop it happening again. Does that put us in a positive or a negative light? I've had conflicting views on that from lawyers. I've had conflicting views on that from insurers. I suppose when you think of it from the perspective of the clearest actually view I've had on it is from environmental health officers and sort of enforcement officers, and they've always said to me, you should absolutely, if there's a problem and something's gone wrong and you think you can rectify it, you should absolutely do it, and it's the right thing to do. And so that's the only, that's the sort of only consistent view I've had. I've had other views from other people, so I don't know what anyone else would say about that, whether anybody's had any advice, pro or con that. You raised a really interesting point about, the claims culture, and one thing I didn't mention is obviously it looks like we're heading to a recession, and typically what happens with a recession is that claims volumes shoot up because people are trying to, in need of generating cash, and they're more apt to make a claim, whether that be a legitimate claim or a spurious claim. So I think that's certainly something to bear in mind as well. A couple of comments here. Darren has said that, going back to what Tim said, that they use Corpore, which I guess is a company, a lot for rehabilitation through insurers. We also have a policy of reaching out to all members of the public who are injured on our premises by a dedicated call centre team to follow up on their welfare and to placate any concerns they have to prevent an escalation to a claim. Our defensibility rate for public liability claims currently sits at 56%. I'd be keen to hear of any other retailers' defence rates as a comparison. I don't know if anybody else here wants to share, but my understanding with retailers that I've worked with is that that's pretty good. I would say that some may be a bit better, some are less, but that's sort of around where I would expect it to be. Andy said, for me, if we, the business, are at fault, then we need to ensure any corrective measure is implemented, even if it does influence the claim. I think that's the moral argument. And I think that obviously what you need to think about is, yes, it might mean that one claim perhaps is successful, perhaps costs you a little bit more. But obviously, if you had another incident and it was caused by the same thing, then that would all be admissible, and therefore that second one is going to cost you, a significant amount more, and also may well end up leading to some kind of criminal prosecution as well. Because if there's a pattern of incidents, then that's more likely. Good stuff. Well, look, thank you guys. Really, really enjoyed this conversation. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything further, but if not, then I think we'll wrap up. We've done our sort of 45 minutes, which is what we're aiming for. Thank you all for joining on the Zoom and for joining in the discussion. Glad we got you working, Nikki, in the end, because that was a valuable contribution from you. Look forward to seeing everybody next week, 10:30 on Wednesday next week. And we'll be talking about why you should take a sales-based approach to safety. See you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.